speaking of the other shooting that took place, which wasn't a mass shooting, but a very targeted, very deliberate shooting, there was a poll conducted after the UHC healthcare shooting. I covered this earlier today, but Luigi Mangione has now been indicted on murder and terror-related charges in the United Healthcare CEO shooting in the state of New York. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg came out earlier today and charged the 26-year-old Ivy League graduate with murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a Manhattan sidewalk. And he's been indicted by a grand jury in the case. And he stands accused of first-degree murder in furtherance of terrorism, second-degree murder, one count of which is charged as killing as an act of terrorism, and criminal possession of a weapon and other crimes. Alvin Bragg said, "We allege that Luigi Mangione carried out the brazen, targeted, and fatal shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan. This type of premeditated, targeted gun violence cannot and will not be tolerated, and my office has been working day in and day out to bring the defendant to justice. I want to extend my heartfelt prayers to Mr. Thompson's loved ones as they continue to grieve. This ongoing investigation is a product of an incredible partnership at all levels of the NYPD. And I want to thank Commissioner Tisch and the prosecutors and detectives who worked collaboratively to apprehend Mr. Mangione. He is now charged in a New York State Supreme Court indictment with 3 counts of murder and faces a maximum penalty of life in prison without parole. Prosecutors are working to extradite Mangione from Pennsylvania, where he was arrested on an unrelated weapons charge. I guess technically it's not an unrelated weapons charge, but they want to extradite him to New York City to formally face charges in the 50-year-old health executive's death. The hearing on the matter is scheduled for Thursday. A spokesperson for Governor Kathy Hochul said that the governor plans to issue a warrant for extradition to New York as soon as the indictment against Mangione was handed up. His lawyers had said their client would not plead guilty to charges in both Pennsylvania and New York. Mangione faces life in prison without parole if convicted of the New York charges. 3 lawyers visited Mangione in prison on Friday, including a new attorney on the case, Karen Friedman Agnifilo. She's a longtime veteran of the Manhattan DA's office. She will be representing Mangione on charges that come from New York. A spokesperson for the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections on Friday told Newsweek that Mangione was being held in a small cell and not in solitary confinement. Mangione is not interacting with other inmates at this time and has taken every meal in his cell, she said. He has gotten mail, though. A spokesperson says Mangione received 33 emails and 6 pieces of mail as of Tuesday morning. She says he also received 153 deposit entries into his commissary account. According to Inmate Handbook, inmates may order commissary items like toilet articles and snacks on a weekly basis. Yeah. Someone in the chat said, premeditated gun violence is totally unacceptable unless it's a random woman getting shot by her ex-boyfriend or gang violence between 2 young kids in a red-lined urban area. No way to fix that stuff. Yeah, that stuff you got to live with. Okay, premeditated acts of violence such as school shootings also, we can't fix that. You just got to live with it. The level of attention that law enforcement agencies have given to the assassination of Brian Thompson, United Healthcare CEO, is very interesting. Except it's not interesting at all and perfectly understandable if you recognize that law enforcement is not there to protect and serve you, but instead to protect and serve the interests of capital. That's it. CEOs are more important than the average person, and if you shoot a CEO in broad daylight for all of his contributions to the death and destruction of many families all across America, and then Americans start recognizing that is a serial killer that was taken out, then yeah, that's a really terrifying prospect for other CEOs, people in positions of power. All of our instruments of justice and all of our institutions like mainstream media and the like are tasked and designed with making sure that everybody understands that is completely unacceptable. Okay? Do your normie friends understand what mainstream media is doing, or have they moved on already? I don't think they give a shit that much. They understand where the anger and resentment comes from towards Brian Thompson. And that's pretty much it. That's it. Meanwhile, a poll was conducted, and it found that 41% of adults under 30 consider the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson acceptable. More than 40% in that demographic who consider it unacceptable. Anger over health insurance companies has been in the spotlight after Thompson was fatally shot December 4th in New York City. Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old, was arrested last week in Pennsylvania and faces charges of Thompson's killing. Survey came from Emerson College polling, found that 68% of all respondents found the actions of the person who shot and killed Thompson to be unacceptable. But a startling 24% of those aged 18 to 29 find it somewhat acceptable, and 17% of that group found it completely acceptable. That is crazy. Okay? Now, issue polling of this sort are, not always going to be accurate. Okay? But it's still fucking insane that they were able to call up, investigate enough people within the age range of 18 to 29 that was like, yeah, I think that shit was awesome. That's crazy. Spencer Kimball, the executive director of Emerson College Polling, said 22% of Democrats said they found a killing acceptable compared to 16% of independents and 12% of Republicans. Said the overall findings underscored shifting societal attitudes among the youngest electorate and within party lines. I think part of this, as I've talked about, is how desensitized Americans, especially young Americans, are to violence. I will say that. But also, yeah, this is the Emerson College poll. For the 18 to 29 demographic, 17% find this to be completely unacceptable. 17%, or no, 33% find it. Sorry. 33% find it completely unacceptable. And of course, the older you get, the more that's going to be, 70 plus people, especially once you get to Medicare for all, I don't really care about your opinion. You know what I mean? Like, this is not your battle. You lived in a dramatically different country your whole life. And also now you have Medicare for all. So it still ends up fucking you over, but or not Medicare for all. Sorry. You have Medicare in general. I think if you want the societal attitude to reflect this, you're going to have to give these guys what these guys have, which is, an opportunity to be able to dream of a better tomorrow. A notion that they can retire at a reasonable age. Healthcare. Unc, your age bracket seems to be not the best. You missed Weekend Update? Yeah, I didn't watch the SNL this week, but I think they made one joke. And they said he was a hypocrite for going to McDonald's and Starbucks. It's UHC's fault that I lost my good med back in March and haven't been the same since. I can barely walk most days compared to no problems before then. There will be more Luigi's because everyone has a reason. Yeah. Like 100%. There are far too many people who've been fucked over by healthcare unnecessarily. So much so that you literally have people who are, coming from wealthier backgrounds that are also engaging in this act of violence. I don't think that the solution to it is just like attacking random fucking healthcare CEOs. You know what I mean? I don't think that that is going to solve this issue. But if no one actually is tasked with solving this problem, this systemic problem, then yeah, there's going to be more. And it seems like the powers that control our lives, all these institutions, are predisposed with not trying to tackle the systemic harms, but instead engaging in new methods of apprehension for those who speak out of turn. You know? Because it's far too difficult to solve the healthcare crisis in this country. It's much easier to keep pressuring people. It's much easier to just say, it's much easier to make an example of some Barbaras and Debras, you know? Prosecute people for being upset at their health care. That's it. Let's remember that one of the most popular American TV shows is about a high school biology teacher who gets cancer and starts making meth to pay his medical bills. Yeah. It's a very, like, Breaking Bad doesn't exist in other countries. You understand? There is no underlying premise like that. There's no UK Breaking Bad. He was a chemistry teacher, not a biology teacher. You're right. Sorry. I read that in the chat. They said it wrong. It's fine. You were on Philly D today?
Bastards, welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. You daily
I didn't even cover the Assad thing.
Reaction. But then, unfortunately, we need to talk about how a teen shooter killed 2 people at the pre-K through 12 Abundant Life Christian School in Madison, Wisconsin yesterday. With reports initially claiming that at around 11 a.m., a second grader at Abundant Life called 911 to report a shooting, with officers then dispatched. But you had police clarifying today that that wasn't entirely correct. It was actually a second grade teacher. But anyway, within minutes, the first officers rolled up, and by 11:05, they reported that the shooter was down and a gun had been recovered. Within then later, it reported that the evidence suggests that the shooter took their own life. Then by 11:30, you had officers and bomb-sniffing dogs clearing the building, and the injured had been taken off to the hospital, which on that note, 6 were injured, 2 of which were students that, as of this morning, are in critical condition. And outside of the shooter, 2 people have died, with one being a teacher and the other a student. And all of this as we still do not know the identities of the victims while the police inform their families. But with that said, we've slowly been getting a clearer picture of what happened thanks to updates from the local police chief, Sean Barnes. Right, yesterday, we learned that the shooter was a 15-year-old girl and a student at Abundant Life, and that the shooting was confined to a study hall with a mix of students from different grades. Also, reportedly, the gun used was a 9mm handgun, and the ATF is currently trying to figure out exactly where it came from. And this is the Madison police are investigating the shooter's parents, who are reportedly cooperating, with the police specifically looking at whether the parents owned the gun that was used in the shooting. And Barnes saying, we also want to look at if the parents may have been negligent. And that's a question that we'll have to answer with our district attorney's office. But saying, at this time, that does not appear to be the case. Now, as far as the motive, that still is officially unclear, though the shooting was reportedly planned in advance. With, for example, CNN saying that a source told them that the shooter had been struggling, which she expressed in writings that the police are currently reviewing, which was also confirmed by Barnes this morning, who said, we have been made aware of a manifesto, if you want to call it that, or some type of letter that's been posted by someone who alleged to be her friend. We haven't been able to locate that person yet, but that's something we're going to work on today. Now with this, the community there has obviously been hit very hard, right? They've planned a candlelight vigil for tonight. A memorial has started to take shape outside the school. We've also seen news outlets interviewing members of the community, with one mother saying,
it's sad, you know, to be home and then somebody call you and say your kids school in like down and shooting and you didn't know where they are. And thank God they were safe. But the trauma, it's a lot, because I'm sure they lost friends and teachers, which is not okay. And I don't think they will be okay for a long time. And I'm not.
Also, with all this, we've seen kind of the general aftermath that we normally see with a situation like this. Right, many politicians pointing to Madison today and their calls for gun control. With, for example, Wisconsin Representative Mark Pocan saying, I've sat through so many moments of silence on the floors of Congress that are followed by 0 moments of action. But then also adding that he even had a media appearance get canceled because the number of deaths was corrected and dropped to 2. With him saying, if that is a societal response, we are screwed. We have to do more as a society. We have to be more outraged that you drop your kid off to a school school and you're not sure they're going to be safe. That's completely unacceptable, and we all need to speak out much louder. Right? And there has been a lot of conversation surrounding both the media coverage of the school shootings and the overall response to them. Right? Like with CNN specifically, they got some heat for interviewing students who were in the building at the time of the shooting, with a number of people responding by saying things like, just seen an 8-year-old girl getting interviewed about the school shooting in Madison, clearly traumatized after seeing her teacher shot. Why are you shoving a mic and camera into these babies' faces? And as a journalist, y'all need to draw the line and stop interviewing children. They don't need to relive the trauma. L for every journalist involved. With also big online commentators in the space like Hasan Piker chiming in, reacting to the CNN clip.
1 week before Christmas, a young student has been killed, a teacher has been killed. How will Madison, Wisconsin even begin to deal with this horrific day? An area leader will join us next.
Dude, this is wild stuff. I swear. It's always like, it's just so commonplace. It's just so commonplace at this point where it's like we have streamlined the coverage. We've streamlined the coverage immediately.
With them then later adding,
now we have like additional industries tasked with, designed with the purpose of extracting some kind of profit out of tragedies like this. And yet we always seemingly find a reasonable market solution. And that doesn't mean that we're actually eliminating the problem. It's never about eliminating the problem. It's about trying to triage and I guess like stop the bleeding by, making more money. Yeah. One man's tragedy is another man's opportunity.
Right. He's not alone there. Many have taken issue with people seemingly trying to profit, whether monetarily or with attention from this shooting specifically. Just one example being that someone
I was actually talking about like industries that are tasked with like doing therapy for school shooting victims and whatnot. I guess it also suits the purpose of like mainstream media as well. And yeah, I think that this person also kind of falls into that a little bit where she's like, oh, I, sought out the manifesto. So like I should be able to fucking watermark it, which is so crazy. But I can't help but remember this bulletproof room that they were trying to sell for American schools, like bulletproof backpacks and bulletproof rooms. You know what I'm talking about? I'm going to show you right now real quick. This. Like, it seems like a joke, but it's not a joke. An Alabama company has created a safe room it believes will save lives during a school shooting. It's a fold-out panic room.
We can't control policy. We can't control politics. We're just a small company that has, I feel like, innovative ideas that can pass the test of time. And we wanted to bring our version of gun control to the nation. We have a deployable unit that folds into the wall and then comes out. It deploys in under 10 seconds, and the entire classroom can be in this and locked into a safe place within their classroom in a matter of 30 seconds or less. And then we have a fully deployed unit that is stationary and it stays.
Anything helps? No? Brother, what are we doing, man? What are we doing? What do you mean anything helps? This is just like... This is giving up. Okay? This is just giving up. What are we doing? It's not anything. This is basically saying, well, we can't fix it, so we might as well try and, again, triage. Yeah, it's a Band-Aid on a artery that is bleeding out.
He's out all the time, and it's actually mounted.
It's like the ship is sinking and you're poking your finger in one of the holes and you're like, this is fine. Anything helps. The ship's sinking.
It's solidly, and it's not deployable. We're now going to hopefully be able to get these in every classroom in America to give everybody a chance to go home at night to their loved ones.
It's wild because this is not a natural disaster. Gun violence is treated as though it is a natural disaster, but it's not a natural disaster. It's not an earthquake. And even then you can take measures against earthquakes as well, which we also seemingly don't. But like, it's not a naturally occurring phenomenon. It doesn't exist anywhere else, just with us.
Online actually shared what they said was the Madison Shooters Manifesto with a watermark on each page. Though I will say it's important to note here that the police have still said they're not ready to confirm whether this actually is what people are saying it is. But regardless, right, that watermark landed the original poster in a world of backlash with people saying things like, an influencer watermarking a school shooter's manifesto with their social media handle feels like an episode the writers of Black Mirror rejected because they thought it was too obvious. But while we watch the public discourse play out and we wait for more information and confirmations to come in, where I'll end this is by saying that obviously our hearts and our thoughts go out to those in Madison. But then,
All right. Okay. Let's talk about the ProPublica reporter on uncovering United Healthcare's secret internal cost-cutting campaign. Going back to Luigi Mangione. Maybe some days you guys will like your. Maybe someday you guys will like your children more than your guns and your Constitution. No. People have completely given up on that. They just literally think that the best way to protect their children is by giving them guns, okay? That's where we're at this stage. It's just not happening. Everything gets worse and fucking worse. There's no solutions whatsoever.
The shooting death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has sparked a national conversation around the frustrations over how the company handles some claims. In a new investigation, ProPublica looked into the claims of one Louisiana mother who says United Healthcare is limiting access to autism therapy for her son. ProPublica reporter Annie Waldman is joining me right now. Annie, great to see you. I mean, you profile a mother, Sherelle Menard, and her son Benji, who has autism. He was diagnosed, as you're right, with severe autism at the age of 3, received treatment, and even the family was celebrating that he would start to speak, a few words, and they started looking at the potential future of Benji very differently and hoped for more treatment. But that something changed, right, according to your reporting, and then suddenly United Healthcare cuts back on the treatment. And then there was a discovery of some sort of secret internal cost-cutting campaign. Tell us about all of that, because it is a very lengthy and great article that you write. I tried to truncate it there, but fill in the blanks for folks.
Yeah, so this year we have done a lot of mental health and behavioral health care reporting, trying to understand how do insurance companies work when they determine what is medically necessary and what's not. And over the course of our reporting, we obtained leaked documents from inside United Health Group by way of their subsidiary Optum, which manages their mental health benefits, that have revealed what is effectively the company's internal playbook for limiting mental health coverage. And in these documents, we uncovered a secret internal cost-cutting campaign that essentially is targeting a growing financial burden for the company, the treatment of thousands of children with autism around the country.
And so that playbook that you talk about, that was developed by Optum, it was a pursuing market-specific action plans, and among those things, to limit children's access to treatment, as specifically autism or particularly challenging conditions. What was the vernacular?
Yeah, so they specifically are targeting children with a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, and specifically they're targeting their Medicaid plan. So about 10,000 children are impacted by this. And even though in their documents, they acknowledge that some areas across the country have very long wait lists for a specialized therapy to help these kids, the company says that they are actually preventing new providers from joining their networks and terminating existing ones who are already in the network. And what happens is that once these networks become smaller, it is very difficult for families to find, clinicians who can provide this therapy for their children, or they have to pay tens of thousands of dollars a year out of pocket for this type of therapy.
So you report Optum, whose parent company, United Health Group, earned $22 billion in net profits last year, is heavily investing in its plan to save millions by limiting access to such care. That's how you reported it. It's pretty alarming. And even in a Washington Post report, someone who worked...
If she says, do you feel like you're heightening the tensions in this tumultuous time? I will fucking be nuked out of orbit. Do you feel like reporting on healthcare profits in this tumultuous time after an egregious act of terror was committed is the appropriate time and place? I will fucking lose it. I don't think she'll do it, but oh my God.
Worked with United's CEO Brian Thompson, who was gunned down, was aware of public frustration with some of the company's actions, and that came before his killing. So what's been the response now from Optum or United
Thank
about
God
your reporting?
she didn't do that.
Yeah, so, United and Optum declined a request that we had and that we made more than a month ago for an on-the-record conversation about their coverage of behavioral and mental health care. We also sent them questions 11 days before our story came out, and they did not respond to them, citing the December 4th killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson as the reason. And an email is...
That's amazing, bro. Companies are so soulless. They literally used the execution of Brian Thompson as like they tried to do it. They were like, "Oh, you're baiting us. You're baiting us in this inopportune time." God damn, that's bloodless, dude. That's fucking bloodless. That's crazy. Never let a crisis go to waste. Oh my Lord. Yes, I have heard about the CEO emergency hotline. I've talked about it yesterday. To be fair, that's what Brian would have wanted to increase shareholder value. You're not wrong. They could turn around and say, "We're doing this for Brian." You know, using his death to ensure we protect our shareholders.
Spokesperson even told us that they were in mourning and could not engage with what they considered a non-urgent story during this incredibly difficult moment in time.
And what has been the response from the Menard family? I mean, how are they now navigating what has become an even more complicated, I guess, health journey for them?
Yeah, what the mother told me, Sherelle, is that if her son doesn't get his therapy, she worries that as he ages, he won't develop the skills that he needs to keep himself safe and help him advocate for himself. So his clinical team, which is based in Lafayette, Louisiana, they are fighting this denial. In fact, they have to go to an administrative law hearing in January to try to get this denial overturned. If it's not overturned, like many families, they may not be able to afford this therapy out of pocket, and Benji will have to scale back the hours that he needs. And this is not just Benji and Sherelle. There are likely hundreds, if not thousands, of families who are dealing with issues with insurance companies trying to get coverage of this type of care.
Annie Waldman, glad you could be with us. And of course, folks, if you want to read the ProPublica story reported by Annie, it is on CNN.com, and you can see it there. And obviously, you just underscored, you believe it's a microcosm of what a lot of American families are experiencing right now. Thank you so much, Annie.
Thanks for having me.
More than $135,000 has been raised for Luigi Mangione's legal defense fund. It's a crowdfunding effort started by a group called the December 4th Legal Committee. Their total fundraising goal as of now, $500,000, and they just might get there. The organizers, alluding to the date United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down on the streets of Manhattan. But they say it's not about the violence from that day. They write, this is a preemptive legal fundraiser for the suspect allegedly involved in the shooting of United Healthcare CEO. We are not here to celebrate violence, but we do believe in the constitutional right of fair legal representation, unquote. But as for the people donating, well, some of them are full on celebrating Mangione's actions, and the donations are coming in at all sorts of amounts, from the highest at $1,300, some as low as $5. One person writes under their $10 donation, and I'm quoting here, "The shot heard around the nation. We cannot let it be in vain. You made the first stand. Thank you. Another person donated $500 writing this. I hope this entire event leads to a rethink.
They're going to arrest your moms and dads, dude. I'm not even kidding. They're going to literally investigate every single person that donates this shit and then try to like go after people for donating, which is, I mean, which shouldn't stop you from donating, for the record, but this never happened when Rittenhouse killed that guy. I wonder what's the difference. Yeah. Yeah, I don't recall people, especially because like that one is political, right? That one is political. There was a very obvious like political motivation behind it. What's interesting about this one is like this seemingly transcends politics, regardless of how hard the media is trying to reframe this as like a partisan issue. Like, I don't think the Debras and the Barbaras that are fucking angry at United Healthcare or their own private healthcare are like, yeah, I'm a card-carrying leftist, you know? I shouldn't have said political. I should have said partisan from the jump. It's interesting because I think there are probably plenty of people who liked Kyle Rittenhouse and donated to Kyle Rittenhouse's defense fund. Ironically, also are fond of Luigi Mangione. Or at the very least, don't give a shit about what Luigi Mangione did. So no, I don't think this is like a partisan issue. I don't think you can analyze this or interpret this from the lens of partisanship. Every American that's been fucked over by healthcare, regardless of what their political background is, understands what happened here. And no matter how much the media tries to, hand wave away all of that, or tries to claim that this is like a bunch of lefties or whatever, a bunch of loony lefties, I don't think they're going to be able to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Thinking of the wealthy people running this country. Health insurance has been a scam for far too long, and it needs to change. Stop talking about it and do something. I want to bring in Sam Beard. He is the...
Yeah, stop talking and do something doesn't mean like go kill CEOs, dumbasses. It means change the system. Like move towards a more humane system where profits are not put over the interests of everyday citizens.
The spokesperson for the December 4th Legal Committee and the host of Party Girls podcast. Sam, thank you for joining this evening. How many donations have you received this far? And are you surprised to see the level of support for someone who is a murder suspect?
Laura, thank you for having me on and for covering this important topic. So far we have received over 4,700 individual donations, averaging about, it seems, $15 or so at the median there. And to be honest, I'm really not that surprised that all of this widespread support has sort of risen up in this moment for this young man alleged to have taken action in this way. I think Americans are fed up with the way that the health insurance system operates.
When you think about you said taking action in this way, he is accused of having committed murder. You've gotten people who've donated to the fund who are embracing and celebrating that murder of this man, Brian Thompson. What do you say to your critics who think this fundraiser is co-signing that murder?
Well, at the end of the day, every American has a right to a fair trial. And I think for every person who might be, exhibiting some sense of joy, there are 10 people sort of asking the question, well, who's the real murderer in this conversation? We're talking about the largest and most successful private health insurance corporation in the history of humankind, right? Which is successful precisely because they generate profits by denying claims, among other things. Just to quote one donor here directly, quote, "We do not condone murder. And for that reason, we cannot condone the actions of United Healthcare. Luigi was standing up to a systematized murder of millions of Americans at the hands of a broken healthcare system."
When you hear that, of course, first of all, I'm a former prosecutor. Everyone deserves a proper legal defense. And frankly, he is presumed innocent at this point in time. They have a burden of proof that they have to carry out. But when there seems to be the equivalence drawn between gunning somebody down in the streets, and again, he is presumed innocent, but somebody gunning him down in the streets, and then the idea of a health insurance company.
Yeah, it's arguably worse. This is what people don't understand. When your grandma's like, oh, I can't get chemotherapy because it's too expensive and insurance won't cover it, I guess I'll just die. That's murder. So yeah, the CEOs that contribute to that profit off of that, you can systematize that murder as much as you want, but they are responsible. That's so crazy that these guys are like, but what do you mean? This is just a person that's behaving in the way that they're supposed to, that's behaving under the capitalist constructs that we exist under. One is different than the other, don't you think? And it's like, to the average person who has experienced the death of a loved one because of this, they don't give a fuck. They still died. To the average person whose life was ruined because they had to go through medical bankruptcy, they don't give a fuck. Oh, that's just the way the system is? Okay, well, I guess we live in a cruel system, so there's nothing you can do about it. You know?
Behaving in the way that has led to, you believe, the deaths of people as well. Are you concerned that that sort of equivalence is going to instigate further harm?
Yeah, that's a good question. As a moral matter, it's horrible when anybody has their life cut short by another person, especially when it could have been prevented, right? But that same logic has to apply both ways. A CEO had his life short, a world-renowned CEO for being very effective in his field, mind you, but he was effective because he profited from denying people's claims, which cut their lives short. So we can't just apply a simple moral rule without acknowledging that we're in an immoral system that degrades the value of some lives while elevating the value of others. And I think what's sort of plain as day at this point is challenging that is, above all, a political act.
This is a great take. Both, I mean, he's just popping off. But yeah, it's the contract hitman defense. I had a fiduciary responsibility to carry out this assassination. Like, what do you mean? That wouldn't work in a court of law. You know what I mean? You can't just be like, sorry, I had to do this. I had to carry out a murder. I had to carry out tens of thousands of murders because, like, that was my job. You know?
And when we treat it only as a moral act, I think we're plugging our ears to its political meaning.
I certainly hear the political consequences and conversations that are going on. This will be dealt with in the criminal court system. So the idea of how it will be addressed will be quite distinct from that overall conversation. I'm learning, though, that one of Mangione's lawyers told my network that he would not accept the money. So what will your group do with it?
So I'm wondering if that's the conversation that happened about a week ago. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Has there been a recent development that you think he will take the money?
No, but there's been a recent development in terms of sort of an expanded legal team. So I would imagine there's different decision makers in that process. And we have yet to establish two-way communication with their newest legal team. We have contacted them via telephone, email, and good old-fashioned snail mail.
That was fantastic. That was a fantastic redirection. Talking about like the inhumanity of the system that we live under. I mean, it was fantastic.
Well, we'll see what happens. Thank you so much for joining us, Sam Beard.
Thank you.
Well, Mangione is expected to be in court next week. We're not exactly sure how his lawyers plan on defending him specifically, but we are getting some clues. I want to bring in Charles Patrick Ewing. He is a board certified.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm shocked that they even had this person on. I'm shocked that they even had this person on because, I would more so assume that they would have. Dude, every time I see a person on a CNN broadcast doesn't mean I have to have them on as well, okay? Like, can chat fucking calm down, please? Holy shit. Calm down. Do you think the jury will convict them? I think that they will find the best possible jury to convict them. It'll be tough, but they'll do it.
Forensic psychologist and a distinguished service professor and professor of law emeritus at SUNY Buffalo. Also here with me, Joey Jackson, is senior legal analyst and defense attorney. Glad to have both of you here. Joey, let me begin with you. Can you first quickly explain to us why Mangione has a second-degree murder charge as opposed to a first-degree charge in New York?
Yeah, Laura, good to be with you. So what happens is that in New York State, first-degree murder is reserved for the killing of a police officer, a peace officer, a judge, a correction officer, a first responder. You don't generally get first-degree murder unless it pertains to one of those issues. The only other conceivable way that it could be first-degree is if it's in furtherance of some act of terrorism, which could be a viable charge, depending upon, of course, what authorities continue to find with respect to that is Luigi Mangione's state of mind, mindset as it relates to the actual crime. Murder in the second degree, however, is preserved for everything else, and that is intentional murder.
Cops are a special class, dude. You know they had to add EMTs and firefighters and shit on there specifically so that it's just not cops. I love that. Like, they write this stuff specifically to protect cops, like to add extra protections to cops. Beyond that, they already have. But then they have to be like, oh, peace officers, like, oh, what? You want EMTs not to be a protected class? It's like, that's not what that's for.
Murder. And so generally people who are charged in New York State with murder are charged with murder in the second degree, absent one of those delineated consequences or actions that I noted before.
Really important to get that distinction. Thanks, Joey. Let me turn to you, Charles. We're getting some hints as to what Mangione's defense could possibly look like. A former CNN contributor, Karen Agnifilo, just signed on to represent him. A few days earlier, here's what she told CNN.
And so it'll be interesting, it'll be interesting to see where the opportunities are for him to defend himself. And it's looking more and more like I think he could potentially mount a psychiatric defense. And I think what Marianne was just saying is exactly right, because was he playing to the cameras versus is he having some sort of psychiatric event happening right as we speak, and are we watching it in real time on TV? Those are some of the things that will come into play, I think, in this case.
Charles, how hard is it to get this kind of insanity plea or an extreme emotional disturbance plea, if he gets offered a plea at all, to have this line of thinking?
Well, it's extremely difficult to make out an insanity defense, especially in New York State. In New York State, the burden of proof is on the defendant to prove, first of all, that he was suffering from a mental illness or from a mental defect, as the law says, which would be the equivalent of an intellectual disability. That's just the beginning. Once you have that, then you have to establish to the jury's satisfaction that you either did not know the nature and consequences of your acts, or you did not know that your acts were wrong. That's a tough sell. About maybe somewhere less than 1% of all criminal cases that go to trial with an insanity plea. And among those cases,
I want to hear that point. But go ahead, Charles. Excuse me.
Yeah, they almost never result in a finding of insanity. But it's so difficult to get that finding from a jury. And without speaking to the merits of this case in particular, because I don't want to do that, but I will say that it's a virtual certainty that his lawyer will consider an insanity defense and will have him examined by a forensic psychologist or psychiatrist, maybe even more. But given what we know from what is currently in the public domain, it will be an extremely difficult case to.
Yeah, the irony here is that given that it is a manifesto, like chatters are talking about how this guy is free him, like he was he didn't know what he was doing, he was mentally ill or whatever, as a joke. It makes it much more difficult when you have a manifesto that you wrote on your premeditated murder, allegedly, especially if the manifesto itself features like fairly commonplace problems. Like, you could have a manifesto, allegedly, that's like the scramblings of a madman. Even that 15-year-old girl could probably, you could make a case that that further proves that this person was not mentally sane. Problem is, his manifesto is too sane. It's not only so sane, but also what was written in the manifesto has seemingly captured the attention of many Americans.
I don't understand why people are celebrating him being killed, because at the end of the day, like I said yesterday, he's dead. His kids don't got no father. That 26-year-old Luigi or whatever his name is, he's gonna be in jail for the rest of his life. And the healthcare system is still the same today.
Nothing changes.
The healthcare company's still denying claims and everything today. So what did that accomplish? And why are you happy about him being gunned down like that?
Good question. Charlemagne the God there ripping those seen as celebrating the suspect accused of murdering the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. Some people online casting Luigi Mangione in a positive light as they air their grievances with the industry. Barry Weiss, editor of the Free Press, is here now. And good morning to you.
Oh, no. Barry Weiss? Free speech, Barry Weiss? Barry free speech, but not like that, Barry Weiss? Peter Thiel's favorite intellectual, Barry Weiss. I'll tell you what it is. It's not that people celebrate the act of murder. They understand that it's instability. Murder in broad daylight is a symptom of a deeply unstable society. The problem is they also are living in a deeply unstable society where social murder is commonplace. So for them, this is just a pressure valve. For many people, they see this as a moment to be like, oh, well, I don't give a fuck. They fucked me over. So who cares? That's it. It's that simple.
Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for having me.
All right. First of all, here is Bernie Sanders talking about some comments that Elizabeth Warren made about this here.
Elizabeth Warren obviously understands killing and murder and shooting somebody in the back is totally unacceptable. But what I think has happened in the last few months is that what you have seen rising up is people's anger at a health insurance industry.
It can't be apples to apples in all of this. You guys are right. Political violence happens because we let it. What the 60s and 70s tell us about Luigi Mangione and the UHZ shooting.
There's no but.
Where's this going?
Well, I think one thing that's important to keep in mind, and that Charles Layman writes about in that piece that you just cited, is to kind of remind people that this killing of Brian Thompson is part of a pattern of normalized political violence over the past decade or so. You have Steve Scalise, the attempted assassination.
I think there's nothing crazier than this fucking freak talking about the normalization of political violence. Bitch, you're the most pro-Israel person on the planet. The fuck are you talking about? She's like directly responsible for the assassination of Rafat al-Raer. That's crazy. That's actually crazy. She's like, how much unrestricted ultra violence has she defended aggressively, demanded more of? It's crazy.
Assassination. You have Gabby Giffords. You have the violent rioting of the BLM summer that was normalized as fiery but mostly peaceful. Unforgettably by CNN. You have, of course, January 6th. You have the pro-Hamas riots. You have protests.
Pro-Hamas riots? The fuck are you talking about? Bro, you can't compare January 6th to pro-Hamas protests. Like, you cannot. I mean, she can and she will. January 6th is like very clearly an insurrection against the federal government. You cannot turn around and be like the anti-Israel protests, the peaceful encampments are equivalent to January 6th. She literally said, wait, hold on. What did she call January 6th?
Of course, January 6th, you have the pro-Hamas riots.
Like, oh, you have January 6th, you have the pro-Hamas riots.
You have protests regularly now at the homes of Supreme Court justices. You have even people like a liberal museum curator in Brooklyn whose apartment building was targeted and attacked. Why? Because she's Jewish and therefore a Zionist and therefore...
Yeah, okay, dude. To be honest, you can't even compare Palestine protests to BLM protests. Yeah, I know.
Unacceptable. My point is that we have normalized an ideology that suggests.
I like that she's saying like things are either objectively violent or I just disagree with the protests and therefore I will call them riots.
Suggests that certain people, because of their identity, because of their jobs, or because of their political outlook, are somehow ripe and, in fact, justifiable targets for violence. The very same group of people, Bill and Dana, who like to tell us that silence is violence, are going out and justifying the cold-blooded murder of a father of two. How is that? How do you comport? How does that comport? How do you make sense of that? And the only way you make sense of it is if you understand that they are operating from a...
Yeah, the only right-wing violence that she mentioned, none of the fucking mass shootings that have happened where the shooters are like, I love being a right-winger. I'm writing a manifesto about how I love being a white nationalist. I love Donald Trump, and that's why I'm trying to kill as many black and brown people as possible. Like virtually every single mass shooting. Virtually every single mass shooting that has taken place in the United States of America is exactly like the way I'm describing it, where people should be like, I'm a right-winger. I love being a right-winger. I'm doing this because I'm a right-winger. Here are my favorite right-wing content creators, Ben Shapiro, Tim Pool, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And it's like, crazy that none of that is a prominent fixture in the way that Americans understand political violence. And it's actually one mention of January 6th, not even mentioning Pelosi's fucking husband, Paul Pelosi, getting hammered in the head by the PP. Like, goddamn. LOL! Chicago mass shootings every weekend are right-wingers? Is that what I said? I'm sure there are plenty of right-wingers that engage in that as well, yes. We're talking about instances of domestic terror, acts of political violence. Not all violence across the board, you fucking dumbass. Yes, I said most political violence. Most political violence. I love how fucking stupid racists are. You know who else agrees with you? Chicago mass shootings every weekend are right-wingers? No, dude. They're poor people, okay? Victims of systematic poverty. Victims of systematic racism, okay? Ironically enough, in spite of all of that, Illinois' gun violence metrics are still far better than most Republican states. Oh, victim, shut the fuck up. Yes, it's true. What do you mean? Oh, victim, shut the fuck up. I grew up in project housing. I am what? Thoden Priol. I grew up in project housing. I don't care what you grew up in. I am those people. Oh, okay. Yeah, Hogg's standpoint theory is always funny. It's like, excuse me, I'm doing a bodies in spaces in an effort to talk about when I'm talking about fucking right-wing. When I'm talking about right-wing political violence, this dumb fuck literally was like, what about black people in Chicago? Excuse me. Excuse me, it's time for a little standpoint theory. What the fuck are you talking about? That's not the point. I love when dudes who have never once said black nor mentioned race Why did you assume that all of the fucking gun violence in Chicago, all the mass shootings every weekend in Chicago are not right-wingers then? What were you using that as a catch-all term? My response to that was, maybe some of them are right-wingers, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about political violence. Why did you assume race? Come on, chatters. Please, we're not dense here, are we? I know a lot of you are purposely trying to fucking behave like you're a dense person. He brought up Chicago when I'm talking about right-wing political violence, specifically to say as a standout term for black people. It is a very obvious bad face substitute for black people. All right, we'll take a week off. Chicago is a liberal city. Man, shut the fuck up. Shut up, you fucking dumb bitch. I love dumb bitches like this that turn around and they go, oh, excuse me, I never mentioned black people. I never mentioned black people. You are the one who said black people when I randomly brought up Chicago. Huh. And then he tried to do a fucking liberal. Oh, God, everyone is a goddamn liberal. I hate this shit. I hate it. I hate dealing with it. I hate dealing with like members in my own community that annoyingly do this purposely obtuse nonsense to be like, I don't really fully understand what you're saying, so I'm just going to take the worst possible uncharitable interpretation. But it's fucking extra annoying when like a very obvious stop hiding, coward, just be racist pussy. Well, I mean, I already banned him, so he can't get out of hiding. Why ban and time on people who disagree with you? It's kind of cringy. To be honest, probably going to get banned for asking. I ban... No. Hold on. Let me unban this guy real quick. I'm going to ban him again in a second. I ban whoever the fuck I want for whatever purpose I want. But the reason why I ban people like that usually is because they derail the conversation while we're having like this conversation is supposed to be centered around political violence. That's the conversation that we're having, right? It's supposed to be about political violence. That chatter came in with a bad faith framing to specifically talk about black people, black on black crime. That's exactly what the purpose of what about mass shootings in Chicago is. We're not having a conversation about mass shooting or gun violence. We have talked about that earlier in the day. This specifically is Barry Weiss doing commentary on political violence. That person came in, used the only hurdle that many of you have, which is to follow for 10 minutes, used the principles that I apply in my day-to-day operation so that every single person, no matter where they're coming from, can have a say in this chat. He used it against all of you to shamelessly and selfishly derail the subject matter back to himself. Okay? Back to a completely irrelevant point. That's it. You can't, on the one hand, appreciate and enjoy the community that I have cultivated. Oh, so mad. Your tears are delicious. Enjoy the next 4 years. Okay, I'm not going to ban this one. This one's just a hog. Never mind. I like this one. We'll keep this one. Why not just ignore? Okay, take a week off. I'm going to keep the conservative, and I'm going to ban the person for a week that said, why not just ignore? Because there will come a day when you want me to answer a question. Okay? There will come a day when you want me to answer a question, and you will hope that I see your question and I answer it. You know? That's it. I don't ignore commentary in the chat. Part of the reason why I don't ignore commentary in the chat is because there are a lot of people who are genuinely curious, who genuinely do want to learn, okay? Who might not see the world with your own eyes, okay? With the way that you see the world. I'm here to be as helpful as I possibly can. So if someone comes in and takes advantage of that to derail the conversation, they get banned. Like, this person quite literally did that. Why ban and time out people who disagree with you? Kind of cringy, to be honest. I'm probably going to get banned for asking lol. and immediately turned around and responded with, "So mad, your tears are delicious. Enjoy the next 4 years." This, for everyone in the chat that's wondering, like, Hasan, why do you ban people? This is the reason why we ban people. He had originally gotten banned. I unbanned him, and he immediately showed his hand. Most people come in to do this. Not all of you. Many of you come in because you have genuine questions. You genuinely are trying to understand what the fuck is going on. And I want to be a resource for you. Okay? People like that are being selfish. They're being self-centered. They're fucking assholes. Okay? They're the weird kids that never got told no. They're the spoiled little children who never grew up. Do you understand? This chat's moderation is based off Blue Sky's mod framework. I bet you use Blue Sky as a framework for banning users in the chat. What? First of all, I'm not even on Blue Sky. I'm literally on Twitter. I don't even use Blue Sky. And secondly, I don't think many of my mods do either. What the fuck is Blue Sky's framework? How the fuck would we know what Blue Sky's framework is? Why are you even thinking about Blue Sky? Are you okay? Like, if you're a right winger and you're mad that you're not allowed to be on a place where there's like a bunch of annoying rad libs, why the fuck are you in my chat complaining about it when I'm not even on it? What the fuck? Anyway, this is the original purpose why I banned that person. And also, usually will ban derailers in general. Because I read one comment and as many people as possible see that as an opportunity to fucking start going, ooh, we got him. We can piss him off. So now, instead of continuing to read the chat, I'm going to go back to Barry Weiss.
In which certain groups are acceptable targets and other groups are unacceptable ones. Other groups are protected. And this is kind of a Manichaean view of the world that is absolutely unacceptable. Either political violence is wrong or it isn't. What we know for sure is that you cannot have a functioning liberal democracy like the one we have and accept that certain people are allowed to be murdered in the streets of Manhattan.
Just to put a fine point on it, this is what Charles writes about. He says political violence cannot coexist with a functioning democracy.
Yes.
Democracy depends on peaceful liberation, allowing each person to have her say, while violence replaces the ballot box with the bullet. If we want the latter, we must be unambiguous in our condemnation of the former, end quote.
And also, let's wait a second and just find out, like, what really went on with this man.
Right.
The suspected killer. He didn't have United Health Insurance. But he hadn't been denied a claim.
But even if he did, right? The idea,
I agree.
Right. It's the idea that I saw this unbelievable tweet that was going viral. Maybe you guys saw it. There was some DJ that had it set over the weekend, and there were just giant flashing photos of Luigi Mangione,
Terrible.
and the crowd is going wild for it.
Right.
There's something like very, very rotten in a culture where that has become not just acceptable, but somehow like cool and
So
chic.
how do we turn it around?
We re-stigmatize political violence and we shame, frankly, any person that is trying to contextualize.
Yeah, Barry Weiss gets to say that while simultaneously championing Israel's genocide, by the way. Because that's not considered political violence. That's just foreign policy. You know, that's just American foreign policy. It's the norm. It has to happen. This is so stupid, dude. You can't expect people to not feel a sense of vengeance and relief. It's not correct. I understand it on principle. Unlike Barry Weiss, I am a humanitarian. Okay? But I'm also not shocked by this reality. I'm not shocked that people look to someone like Brian Thompson as a placeholder for the violence that they've experienced in their lives. Okay? That's it. Oh, we got to shame this. We got to stigmatize it. Like, you can't. It's not going to work. No one gives a fuck.
something that there's no context that makes this acceptable. You murdered a person that is the father of two.
People like you
Full
talk
stop.
about.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, Osama bin Laden had kids too, man. He was also a dad. You think I give a fuck what happens to him? Suck my dick.
You also
literally advocated for the death of Refat al-Ra'ar, who also had children. His entire family was wiped out by Israel, the country that you seemingly always defend and forget your free speech first principles for on a regular basis when it's about advocating to block, ban, and ruin the lives of fucking pro-Palestinian demonstrators.
wrote about, we had Terry Glavin. I read this over the weekend. The explosion of Jew hate in Trudeau's Canada. The subhead is that there's been a 670% increase in
Okay, I don't care about it. Yeah, it's like then they go into anti-Semitism. They're just hitting like every fucking. They're hitting basically everything they can. All right. Okay, here's a
Up
very
next
funny
here
thing that
on Prime-
happened. I never really covered this, but so CNN.
I really want to.
Wait, never mind. Okay, CNN actually has a new take on Luigi Mangione. Apparently, attorneys explaining terrorism might have overextended the prosecutor's office.
So tell us more, Shimon, about what District Attorney Bragg had to say.
Look, I mean, essentially what they're calling this by these charges, Jake, is this was an act of terrorism. They feel that they have enough evidence based on the writings that they were able to obtain from the defendant, Luigi Mangione, that indicates that this was all about fear, and fear to the point where to bring this kind of charge, it's kind of unprecedented here in New York City. You know, it's mostly reserved in cases where there's support of terrorism, things like that. But this is so significant that they went ahead, given the writings, given the reaction to what happened here, the praise for Luigi Mangione over what he did. I mean, that was a big part of this press conference, the idea that there is this lack of empathy for the.
It is kind of wild to call this terrorism because he killed a CEO. Like, violence against CEOs is an act of terror now.
CEO Brian Thompson, and just
violence against
the visceral, sort of
violence against one particular CEO is an act of terror.
The way people have reacted, and so all of that, the DA says, led them here. They believe that this was now an act of terrorism, that this murder was committed in the furtherance of terrorism as the statute calls for. And specifically, I asked the DA about that statute, and he said quite simply, when you look at what it says, it's intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence policy, or affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder or assassination. And that is exactly what the DA and the prosecutors here and investigators feel happened. I mean, when you look at the language that the DA used, saying, quote, this was a killing intended to invoke terror, talking about the way in which Mangione went about this murder, the planning, the calculated nature, the vicious nature of what they allege he did here. And the other thing really here, and I think the DA hit on this, and what's forgotten so much is the victim here, Brian Thompson. I mean, the police commissioner held up a New York Post cover here to show just how people have reacted to what has happened here, and so much hate towards CEOs and so much concern now over the threats that are facing CEOs. So all of that brought us here today, and I do think this is so unprecedented to see this kind of charge being brought here from the DA's office in Manhattan. But there's still a lot more work to do here, and the DA, of course, reminding folks not to forget about Brian Thompson and his family.
And Shimon, we're also here.
Bro, this is like, I know I was joking about people of means, like people of wealth, being like a subcategory, an additional protected class, but we kind of are getting there. it is kind of wild. Like, they wanted to really punish Luigi Mangione. They wanted to like make an example out of him. So they kind of hit him with the book. And I guess the argument will revolve around terrorism. And maybe the reason why they put terrorism in the forefront of the argument is to maybe goad him into demonstrating that he had a political purpose behind it. Because I'm thinking about why you'd prosecute him as a not like simple premeditated murder, but instead terrorism. Because like they got him dead to rights on premeditated murder, right? Like in New York State, it's second-degree murder. It's not first degree. First degree is for peace officers and whatnot. But you can escalate it to first-degree murder if a terrorism designation is slapped onto it, as far as I understand. But it's kind of weird because it is definitely overreach. Having said that, I guess like it's interesting because maybe they think he is like, maybe they're convinced that he is so politically minded that he will follow through on it and will offer them additional evidence in an effort to have his voice be heard by Americans. He will say like, no, yeah, this was inherently a political act of violence. Does that make sense? Terrorism charge is almost not at all about him as an attempt to deter possible future copycats. Yeah. Because in order to defeat the terrorism charge, he has to kind of destroy, he has to kind of just be like, I don't know why I was writing that fucking piece of paper, the manifesto or whatever. Right? Does that make sense? Because if he stands by the manifesto, then that gives him further, that gives them the allowance to lean into the terrorism charge. Because like you wrote that because you wanted copycats. You wrote that because you wanted to terrify the public or whatever. But then again, I don't know how the prosecution of terrorism really works because, as I've said before, it is a political designation that has no legal standing, like no real well-definable legal standing. That's why dumbasses like XUC will like write under my Twitter post about Luigi Mangione getting a slap with terrorism charges, a Google definition of it. You know what I mean? Because like, yeah, he said, after thorough research, I found this. Terrorism is a technically meaningless classification. There is no real universally definable, applicable standard of terrorism. Does that make sense? Because if there was one, America would be the top disher of terrorism, the number one responsible party of terrorism. Take the El Hassan law. What? Yeah, I know. I took the L here. I haven't spent countless hours and an endless amount of reading on the political designation of terror and how it is used as a mechanism to deny habeas corpus from the average person that is apprehended by the American state, and how it is an arbitrary distinction, which is precisely the reason why even most legal bodies will not offer the designation of terrorism with the same willingness that like the United States of America applies certain militant groups the classification of terrorism. Even having said that, though, the standard is is hard to apply to Luigi Mangione as well. People that are pro-private healthcare would be labeled terrorists if the Google definition was a legal one. Yeah. First-degree murder is a prosecutorial overreach, but could so easily backfire. The prosecution now has to make that case, and in doing so, healthcare is now an issue at trial. They've opened that door to making this a circus. I know, which is why I said in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, before we knew the motive, before we knew anything, just the victim, I said that arresting this person and then putting forth a highly publicized, highly televised trial will inevitably make this a much larger issue for healthcare in this country, for for-profit healthcare in this country, because when people immediately looked at the situation, they understood what the motives were before they even knew what the motives were. And televising this trial and trying to ridicule Luigi Mangione in the process is only going to give further credence to the manifesto that he wrote, right? Even if he never had a manifesto, which I didn't even know he had one at the time. I said this would give him a universal platform to say this is what is at stake here. Yeah, bro, even at the PhD level, we do not have a collectively agreed parameter or definition of terrorism. It's one of the most essentially contested concepts. All concepts are essentially contested, but terrorism is the worst I have come across the social sciences. Yes, because there is a purpose for it. That is the reason why America's standards for what constitutes a terror organization is far different than even the global standards or any other international standard. That's it. George Floyd's murderer was just a cop having a rough day. Brian Thompson's murderer is a bloodthirsty terrorist and a sick individual. It is interesting how the media and our lawmakers actually very clearly articulate how much this country is not for the general public. We are not the class they are protecting. Exactly. Maybe they won't televise it. There's no way to not televise it. Like they won't actually allow cameras in the New York City courts, but it will still be televised because there will be journalists inside of that courtroom every day. Unless they issue like a gag order or something, which then would be a story in and of itself. Yeah, it's a New York State court case. It's up to the judge's discretion, I think, to allow the entire process to be televised or not. Hey, yo, gag order. Pause that, big bro. No. You're gagging on it. Let's continue.
Hearing from the suspect's lawyer on the New York extradition.
That's right. So his newly hired lawyer here in Manhattan, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, is telling us that he is not going to fight extradition. So it could be Jake down on Thursday. We expect to see Luigi Mangione in court.
Here, if you want to understand, like, the nature of language, the nature of political language, and how sometimes certain designations are used to hide and omit key details. This photo in and of itself is a perfect definition or a perfect demonstration of what I'm talking about. Taking advantage of the downtime between electoral college meetings to work on advancing my bill to make sure no political flags are flown in government buildings. If you know, you know. He's standing in front of an Israeli flag. Jewish and proud Zionist, speak for myself, not the state of Florida. Senator Randy Fine. Do you understand? The Israeli flag is not a political one. Okay? But I suspect if someone had an Iranian flag, they would consider that to be a political one. The Cuban flag is a political one. The Venezuelan flag is a political one. The Israeli flag is not. Do you understand? Yeah, he means pride flags, Palestinian flags. Confederate flags or the Israeli flag aren't political. They're historical. They're flags of a state. That's it. Also, I don't know what flag is not political. I guess the only flag I can think of that's not political is the one that what's her face? Chloe posted on Haas Twitter. You know what I'm talking about? The one with me on it. Nautical flags. Least political flags is Six Flags. One of them is literally Confederate flag, dude. New images of Luigi with a holstered gun. Okay, calm down. Oh, it wasn't Chloe. It was Clancy. My bad. Anyway. Let's continue.
In Pennsylvania on Thursday on the case in Pennsylvania and an extradition hearing, that by Thursday night, he could be in the hands of NYPD detectives who would transport him back to Manhattan, where he would be processed and then likely spent some time at Rikers Island before he is arraigned by a judge here in Manhattan. And it's expected that he will be held awaiting trial. And also very significant that he is potentially now facing the rest of his life in prison once he's convicted. Obviously, a lot more to do, and for the defense team and for prosecutors. But the process will get underway once he's here in Manhattan, and that can happen as soon as Thursday, Jake.
And Stacey, your take on the extradition? Do these new charges, first-degree murder and terrorism, does that change any of this?
It really doesn't. What's going to happen when he appears in Pennsylvania, if he goes forward and waives or consents to extradition, I should say, then New York law enforcement will already likely be in the courtroom in Pennsylvania. He'll be processed out of the Pennsylvania system. He'll still have a hold from the pending charges in Pennsylvania, which will wait out indefinitely while New York addresses its case. And they'll transport him right back to New York and get him into an arraignment in front of the New York Supreme Court criminal, which is for felony indictments. The indictment is already handed up by the grand jury. They'll present him with that indictment and his attorney, and undoubtedly he'll enter a not guilty plea. But there's something I really want to point out here, which is highly unusual, and it's my opinion that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has a bit overreached in this indictment. They were originally going to go forward with a murder 2 charge against Luigi Mangione, which is just having the defendant having the intent to cause death of another human being and the defendant being the cause of that death. They've now gone forward and enlisted this terrorism component.
Yeah, tell me more. They overcharged,
to a murder
baby. Let's
1
go.
indictment, which means they presented evidence in front of the grand jury, which is a group of 24 people from the community, without a judge in place, just a district attorney and a group of 24 grand jurors who hear evidence. It is undoubted, or I believe that the DA presented that alleged manifesto to try to get this terrorism charge added on as murder one, but they're going to have a harder time proving that in court for one reason, and I'll make it fast. This victim was shot in the back of the head, not in the front of the head, on a quiet sidewalk early in the morning in the dark, and it doesn't appear from a defense attorney's perspective that this was intended to be a terroristic type of murder.
One other thing I want to ask is just I want you to take a listen from moments ago. The Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Let's roll that tape.
One count of murder in the first degree is a killing in furtherance of terrorism. 2 counts of murder in the second degree. 1 charging that the killing was done as an act of terrorism, and the second pertaining to the fact that the killing was intentional.
So, Stacey, you think a defense attorney would disagree with that and with what Shimon laid out, that the prosecution will explain is that because he was targeted, Mr. Thompson, for being a CEO of a health insurance company, and this does appear to be politically motivated in a sense, but you disagree with those charges, or you think a defense attorney would take issue?
I think his defense attorney is going to.
How is killing a CEO supposed to cause fear in the minds of the public? Maybe I'm fucking brain broken. Yeah, I ain't fearful. I don't know. I'm the public. I'm not afraid. I know what his fucking intentions were. I don't know. I think most of the public are not. I mean, we know for a fucking fact that at least 41% of 18 to 29-year-olds, a plurality of 18 to 29-year-olds at least, don't consider this to be scary. Actually, the number is probably way higher. 18 to 29-year-olds, a plurality of 18 to 29-year-olds actually say that it's good that this guy killed the CEO. So if you were to ask, like, are you afraid of your safety because of the actions of Luigi Mangione, I would suspect that the broad swaths of American society would be like, nah, not really.
To definitely take issue at trial. They may even move to.
You don't think it's valid that his intent was to cause copycats? I'm not saying that. I would never say that. How dare you? How dare you say that? It's crazy, chatter. Good luck proving that in a court of law to a jury of Luigi Mangione's peers. Seems like you're just making that up. What are you, a fucking federal law enforcement officer? What the hell is this?
To dismiss the top count of murder one, and that would be Karen Agnifilio, because arguing this was a terroristic act when he was on a quiet street in the dark shooting a victim in the back of the head and then intending to influence the whole world about the insurance industry was an unintended consequence of this murder. No one expected the social media.
Hey, it's not. Hey. It's not his fault. Everybody was like, bro, before they saw the manifesto, if I'm a lawyer, I'm going to be like, excuse me. People immediately assume that this was a hurting victim of the for-profit healthcare insurance before they even heard of a manifesto, before they even knew who the shooter was. All they needed to know was the victim. It ain't his fault. Cooking.
media outpouring, the disturbing social media outpouring from this act, and to have the district attorney and law enforcement from New York mention that there was a social media outcry in relation to a terroristic act is putting the cart before the horse. I mean, the murder happened first, the outcry was second, and totally unpredictable. So I think this might be a case of overreaching on a murder one. I could see why they have enough evidence, or they believe, law enforcement, that they have enough evidence for murder to...
Didn't his manifesto literally state he chose to shoot because he was concerned about bystanders? That would be premeditation to not do terrorism. Yeah, basically, they're trying to say that, like, this person wanted other people to be copycats and go out and shoot other for-profit healthcare CEOs, and therefore creating an unstable environment. That's what the argument is from the prosecution. But like, it is a bit of an overreach, in my opinion. So it's win-win regardless, because if they hit it on that angle, which they obviously are, then all of a sudden, the party that's supposed to represent the quote-unquote people, right, the prosecutors, are going to have to defend the healthcare industry and for-profit healthcare CEOs. Okay, so that already causes, in my opinion, a big divergence between the actual people and what their opinions are. So it ends up amplifying this message further. And also, it gives more opportunity to his defense to create reasonable doubt.
Too, but this is going to be a very interesting turn.
John Miller, I want to play for you. Listen to the NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch just moments ago.
The New York Post reported that some extreme activists were circulating a deck of cards with other most wanted CEOs to be targeted for assassination.
I'm telling you, dude, they want to arrest people that are like, I feel like they want to fucking prosecute people that are just like, yeah, I love Luigi Mangione. It's pretty wild. It's pretty crazy. It's just that the people are united, and as long as they remain united, as long as they have numbers, it's going to be fairly hard to just like pick people apart like this. You know? Thought crimes are making a comeback. Thought crimes have never gone away. What are you talking about? Look at the last year. If you hurt the feelings of the state of Israel, you deserve the death penalty.
These are the threats of a lawless, violent mob who would trade in their own vigilantism for the rule of law.
John Miller, what do you...
Why is this woman lying in a press conference? That deck of cards isn't in circulation. I should know. I pre-ordered it. Oh, we're all going to fucking jail, dude.
Hearing from your NYPD sources about this, are they going after the people who made these cards? Do they think these are serious threats?
Well, they do think that they are serious threats, and we're dealing across a number of domains here. One is the psychological effect and after effect that we see in this. Compare something like this, which is a relatively unique murder of the CEO of an industry because he was the CEO of the biggest company in that industry, in this case, healthcare. In school shootings, we see what they call the contagion effect, which is one of these things happens, it gets a great deal of attention, and the next person who was already thinking of something like that then may accelerate their plans. The idea that this has become a social media phenom, the idea that somebody has printed cards, the idea that just outside a high-level meeting of CEOs of a number of companies at a hotel last week, wanted posters of CEOs were posted on lampposts and scaffolding around the block showing their faces with their salaries underneath. Brian Thompson's was among them with an X across his face. The posters said, Brian Thompson's claim was denied, his claim to live. Whose claim will be denied next? This is the propaganda of terrorism.
I mean, it literally is free speech. Like, I feel like this is simply an art installation that factors in publicly available information into its art installation. It should be protected by the First Amendment. The idea that this is like a call to violence to like kill CEOs, like I get the I get why you can feature it like that, but it's no different than like fucking what do you call it? Kathy Griffin cutting a fake Trump's head. Are you being serious? Yeah, I am. I think that this is totally defensible in a from a First Amendment standard. How is this not a call to violence, Omega Law? I mean, all matter of art has a call to violence featuring in it. It's not, now you are declaring that a piece of art or any kind of propaganda is inherently violent. Like, I think that this is still subjective. It's up to the interpretation. It's social commentary. I understand why people see this and go, "Oh, dude, this is like completely unacceptable." It's a direct call to like kill other CEOs. But it's like fucking tagging, eat the rich on a wall. You know what I mean? You got motherfuckers that only play COD and Halo saying that art has no call to violence. Yeah. Someone said, and if it was streamers, brother, do you think I don't get death threats on a daily fucking basis? Do you think as a streamer I am responsible for the deaths of people? Do you guys have no fucking understanding? Like, if people posted posters of streamers and how much money they make all around New York, okay? Not like where they live or their homes or whatever. Did I say that? No, you implied it. Why are you trying to be sneaky? Which is fine. I get death threats on a daily fucking basis regardless. Okay? What are you talking about? Twitch streamers, in comparison to for-profit healthcare CEOs, are one, infinitely closer to the general public, regardless of how much money they may make or may not make. And two, Twitch streamers are not making money off of, denying people's healthcare claims, dude. Please. That's crazy. Having said that, I have entire websites dedicated, made by people and their communities, like content creators who have literally demanded for my death. You know what I mean? You were responsible for the death of our mom's innocence. What New York considers second degree is what most of the states would call first degree. Many of the amplifying circumstances don't really apply to this case. This will likely jeopardize their entire case when considering how they'll get a jury to agree about this elevation and lead with him walking on a technicality, even if on the off chance he's convicted, there is a chance he won't survive an appeal. I couldn't get healthcare because Hassan has a house. A wild statement I expect to hear from now on. I know. Like, I don't know, man. I feel like D literally said in so many words that he hopes you die. Yeah, he has time and time again. Not much I can do about that.
And this is, in part, why the Manhattan District Attorney charges the case this way. Now, we know what they know, which is he had allegedly a manifesto on his person referring to these parasites in the plural, not the singular.
Did you respond to H3's podcast yesterday about you? No. Why the fuck would I do that, dude?
What we don't know was, did Luigi Mangione have plans to kill more? But what Commissioner Tisch is trying to do here is sound a clarion call, an alarm, saying the NYPD and law enforcement in general will not tolerate this going from propaganda to action, and that they will track down who's ever responsible in any case.
The CNN guy that's speaking, prior to joining CNN, Miller served as Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence and Counterterrorism in the New York Police Department. So that's why he's saying this? Yeah. Has a school shooter with a manifesto ever been charged with terrorism? I don't think so. I mean, maybe. But I think that would fit, that would suit the purpose of domestic terrorism a lot better than a guy killing a CEO. Like, considering that since 9/11, I think it's like 75% or more of the incidents of domestic terror that has happened on U.S. soil have been conducted by far-right, oftentimes white nationalists, neo-Nazi, anti-government extremists. So usually when another lone shooter or a mass shooter writes a manifesto that is directly in line with those previous incidents, urging others to basically do the same, that I think fits the already weird standard, the already arbitrary nature of like terrorism as a designation. But that fits that a lot better than a guy doing a hit on one healthcare CEO. He implied he's going to spend his holiday break working on a content nuke on you. It's just very sad at this point. That does make me sad, but there's not really much to do about that.